The silence in the Galactic Council chamber pressed down like a physical weight as Admiral Jake Morrison stared at the final vote projected on the massive holographic display hovering above the gathered delegates. The numbers glowed in sharp blue light, spelling out a verdict that churned his stomach. 47 alien civilizations had just voted to abandon the Outer Rim. Territories, every single one, had chosen to leave those worlds to their fate. Not a single species had voted to resist. Not one had even abstained. Jake remained perfectly still. His hands were clenched so tightly his knuckles were white and his jaw ached from the tension. He had anticipated this result, yet seeing it manifested in cold, glowing numbers made it somehow more unbearable. The council speaker, a towering insectoid named VL, crossed his multiple arms over his armored chest and announced in a monotone, detached voice that the decision was final and irreversible. The Krell invasion fleet was far too powerful for the Council's forces to stop, and all military assets would be withdrawn from the Outer Rim, within 48 hours to protect the densely populated core worlds. A surge of heat and fury rose in Jake's chest. But his voice remained calm and measured. He reminded the Council that 12 billion lives hung in the balance and asked if they understood that they were condemning all those beings to certain death. V's compound eyes revealed nothing, no flicker of remorse or hesitation, as he responded that the Council was preserving hundreds of billions more in the core systems. The mathematics were unavoidable. They would save what they could and sacrifice what they must. Beside Jake, Commander Lisa Hayes of Earth's diplomatic corps stepped forward. Having spent 3 years building relationships with the Council, she tried a different tactic. She noted that humanity had only been part of the Galactic Council for 15 years, and that its fleets were not yet fully integrated into the Council's defense network. Perhaps, she suggested, the Council could grant Earth it's time to mobilize and explore alternative strategies against the Krell advance. Ambassador Threx, a reptilian from the Valoran Empire with polished scale-like skin and piercing yellow eyes, cut her off. His gaze seemed to pierce humans like fragile insects. Coldly, he stated that humanity's 8 billion people across 4 small colonies commanded perhaps 300 warships at most. The Council had already dispatched 3,000 ships against the Krelland. All had been annihilated within weeks. What could humanity possibly achieve with a tenth of the forces that had already failed so completely? Jake held Threx's gaze without flinching. Humanity can try, he said simply. A ripple of derisive sounds erupted throughout the chamber laughter, perhaps from dozens of alien species echoing off the crystalline walls. These were the same beings who had welcomed Earth into the Council 15 years ago with speeches of cooperation, friendship, and mutual defense. They had shared technology, open trade routes, called humans allies, and now they laughed at the idea that humanity might attempt to save 12 billion lives. Speaker Vel lifted a clawed hand, and the chamber fell silent once more. His voice rang firm. The Council had voted. The decision was final, and all military forces would withdraw from the Outer Rim immediately. The session concluded, and the chamber was dismissed. Delegates filed out, their conversations already shifting to mundane matters, as though they had not just sentenced billions of lives to death by abandonment. Jake stood frozen, watching them leave, a cold weight settling deep in his chest. Just 3 months ago, the Zephrons had been hosting cultural exchanges in the Outer Rim, and the Mordani had mining operations across 12 different worlds. Now those same species were walking away, leaving everyone to die without so much as a backward glance. Lisa gently touched his arm. "We should return to the human embassy," she said quietly. "President Clark needs to be informed immediately." Jake nodded slowly and followed her out. Though his mind was already racing ahead to what would come next, the walk through the alien capital felt longer than usual, and Jake barely noticed the astonishing architecture around him. Nexus Prime's skyline was a chaotic harmony of dozens of species. Designs, towers of living crystal beside buildings grown from engineered plants, alongside structures that seemed to defy gravity itself. By comparison, Earth's embassy was simple steel and glass, almost primitive next to the alien constructions, but it felt like home, inside the secure communications room. Lisa worked swiftly to establish a quantum link to Earth while Jake prepared himself for a conversation that could change everything. When the connection opened, President Catherine Clark's face appeared. Her expression already grim. She had been briefed on the council vote. She asked him to confirm the details. Jake recounted everything. 47 alien races had voted to abandon the Outer Rim entirely, and all council forces would be gone within 48 hours. 12 billion lives were at stake, including 40 million humans scattered across various colonies. The council deemed the Krell invasion unstoppable and had written off entire star systems full of living beings. Clark was silent for a long moment, her eyes calculating the political, military, and moral consequences. Finally, she asked for Jake's professional assessment. Could the Outer Rim be defended successfully? He took a deep breath and answered honestly. By conventional council military standards, no. The Krell had annihilated council fleets with ease. Yet he noted that the council species fought rigidly by committee, using centuries-old tactics suited for enemies who followed predictable rules. The Krell followed no rules, took no prisoners, and showed no mercy. They consumed everything in their path like locusts. Moving relentlessly to the next target, Clark nodded, completing his thought. The council races were too rigid, too bound by protocol. To confront an enemy like the Krell, Jake added that humanity might fare better. Because humans were adaptable, accustomed to fighting dirty, changing tactics on the fly, she asked directly whether he thought humanity should attempt to defend the Outer Rim. Despite the council declaring it impossible, Jake glanced at Lisa. She gave a subtle nod. We have to try, he said. Nobody else will, and leaving 12 billion people to die is unacceptable. Clark was silent again, weighing the decision. When she spoke, her voice carried absolute certainty. She instructed Jake to return to Earth immediately and begin preparations for full military deployment. If the Council would not defend the Outer Rim, humanity would do it alone. In the days that followed, Earth orbit erupted in controlled chaos as preparations for war began. Jake stood on the observation deck of the orbital command station, watching dozens of ships move in carefully orchestrated patterns, preparing for the impossible mission ahead. Military vessels were loaded with weapons and supplies. Converted civilian freighters were retrofitted with defensive systems. Retired warships were pulled from mothballs and made combat-ready once more. Commander Lisa Hayes appeared beside him, datapad in hand, her expression a mixture of pride and concern. 287 warships are ready for immediate deployment, she reported. Another 63 are in various stages of construction, potentially ready in 2 weeks if the shipyards operate nonstop. Jake asked about the civilian conversions. Lisa answered that 142 freighter captains had volunteered to convert their ships into auxiliary combat vessels. Engineering teams estimated that 90% of these ships could be fitted with weapons and shields within 5 days, though they would not survive long against Krell warships. They could provide support fire and assist in civilian evacuation. Jake inquired about personnel. Lisa's expression softened. Recruitment centers across Earth and all 4 colony worlds had been overwhelmed with volunteers. Over 2 million people had signed up in the first week alone, and the numbers kept climbing. The flow of volunteers was still coming. Every military academy graduate from the past decade had returned to active duty, and even 70-year-old veterans from the old Earth wars were demanding to serve aboard ships. Jake felt his throat tighten. It was so perfectly human to have more willing fighters than ships to put them on. He asked if the Council species had made any official response to humanity's mobilization. Lisa told him that the Galactic Council had issued a formal statement, expressing concern over humanity's rash decision and made it clear they accepted no responsibility for what would happen next. Yet, behind the official rhetoric, some species were quietly assisting. The Zephyrions transmitted detailed technical specifications for their shield generators, hinting that the data could help protect human ships against Krell weapons. The Mordani shipped 60,000 tons of refined titanium alloy to Earth's shipyards, requesting no payment. Jake understood immediately. These species were bound by the Council vote, but were hedging their bets by helping humanity in secret. Lisa also shared unexpected news from the Outer Rim territories themselves. The supposedly helpless civilians had begun organizing resistance networks, setting up supply depots, coordinating evacuation routes, and sharing intelligence on Krell movements. Some settlements were arming themselves with mining equipment and industrial tools repurposed into weapons. The people out there had realized the council had abandoned them, decided to fight rather than wait to die. A communication alert interrupted their discussion. Jake learned that President Clark wanted him at Pacific Command immediately for a strategy briefing. He told Lisa she was coming with him, and they boarded a shuttle bound for Earth. The flight gave Jake time to think as he watched his home planet rotate slowly below. 2 centuries ago, Earth had almost been destroyed during the resource wars, when humans fought over water, oil, and food. The planet had been scarred and damaged, barely surviving. Humanity had learned from that near extinction, healing the world over generations. Now, Earth was green again, with restored forests, clean oceans, and carefully managed cities. Humans had fought so hard to save this one planet, and now they were risking everything to save worlds most of them had never even seen Pacific. Command rose from the West Coast Mountains, a massive fortress serving as Earth's primary military headquarters. The main briefing room was filled with the highest-ranking officers from every branch of the armed forces, alongside representatives from all 4 colony worlds. President Catherine Clark stood at the front, flanked by Fleet Admiral Ryan Cooper and General Patricia Valdez. Behind them, a huge holographic display projected the Outer Rim territories in 3 dimensions. Red markers tracking known Krell positions. Clark wasted no time on pleasantries. Humanity's mission was simple, though executing it would be nearly impossible: defend the Outer Rim territories and push back the Krell invasion. Despite having only 1/10 of the military force that the Council had, already lost trying the same thing. General Valdez stepped forward, her voice sharp and commanding. She acknowledged the terrible odds but explained why humanity could succeed where the Council had failed. The holographic display shifted to recorded battles between Council fleets and Krell forces. Valdez highlighted that Council species fought by consensus, adhering to rigid doctrines that required committee approval for every tactical decision. The display showed Council ships maintaining perfect formations and executing maneuvers likely approved by oversight boards weeks in advance. The Krell tore through those formations like paper, exploiting the Council's inability to adapt when plans failed. Valdez explained that the Krell fought with pure instinct and overwhelming aggression, exploiting any weakness without hesitation. The Council's greatest strength, their unified command, was also their fatal flaw, as they could not adapt fast enough against an enemy changing tactics every few seconds. Admiral Cooper took over the briefing, outlining humanity's advantage. Thousands of years of fighting one another in brutal wars had trained humans to improvise, adapt, and think quickly in the chaos of battle, where adaptation and improvisation meant survival. Earth's entire military history had been forged on asymmetric warfare, guerrilla tactics, and learning to win against superior numbers by being smarter, faster, and more flexible than the enemy. Cooper explained that humanity would completely restructure their fleet, abandoning the rigid Council battle line doctrine entirely. Instead, they would adopt Wolfpack tactics, small groups of 5 to 8 ships, each granted full autonomous command authority. Every pack could make independent tactical decisions without waiting for higher command, coordinating attacks through quantum communication networks. When one pack discovered a weakness in the enemy formation, it would strike immediately, while nearby packs swarmed to support without awaiting orders. General Valdez added that humanity would also deploy Marine boarding teams, equipped with experimental combat gear. Unlike the Council, which fought strictly ship-to-ship battles, humans would board Krell vessels and engage in close-quarters combat, if necessary. Officers murmured in shock. The Krell were biological nightmares designed for hand-to-hand killing. Valdez countered coldly that humans had been fighting up close for 10,000 years, and perhaps it was time to show the galaxy what properly motivated and equipped human infantry could do. President Clark gave Jake his orders directly. He would command the entire operation with full tactical authority. He could choose his captains and organize the wolf packs as he saw fit. Jake accepted the responsibility, feeling its weight settle on his shoulders like a tangible burden. The transition from faster-than-light travel back to normal space. It always caused brief disorientation. But Jake had done it so many times, he barely noticed the fleeting vertigo. What immediately caught his attention was the view displayed on the main screen of his flagship. The Defiance housing 300 crew members and armed, enough to obliterate a small moon. Before them hung the star system Talos 3. Yet it looked nothing like the charts and survey maps. Lieutenant Danny Wright manned the sensor station, his voice tight with tension as he reported the findings. Sensors were picking up debris fields from at least 40 destroyed vessels. Wreckage unmistakably from Council species ships. Additionally, 27 active distress beacons were scattered across 3 orbital paths, some transmitting continuously for weeks without rescue. Jake's jaw clenched painfully. The Council fleet had been here, and had fought the Krell and lost. Then they had retreated, abandoning their own crews to die slowly in crippled ships and failing life support systems. Jake asked how many Krell warships were currently in the system. Danny reported 6 Krell cruisers patrolling around the 4th planet. The enemy completely ignored the distress beacons, as if the dying survivors were beneath notice or simply not worth the ammunition to finish off. Commander Lisa Hayes suggested from her station that perhaps the Krell were using the survivors as bait, hoping to lure rescue ships into an ambush. Jake acknowledged the possibility and activated the fleet-wide communication channel. All Wolfpack leaders, he announced. We have survivors needing immediate rescue and 6 Krell cruisers to destroy. It's time to see if our tactics work in real combat. One by one, the pack leaders confirmed over the Quantum channel. Pack Alpha was commanded by Captain Ellen Foster, a veteran with 20 years of combat experience and a reputation for aggressive maneuvers. Pack Beta was led by Captain Justin Cole, younger but top-ranked in tactical simulations at the Academy. The confirmations continued until all 42 wolf packs acknowledged they were ready. Jake studied the tactical display, watching the Krell patrol patterns. The enemy moved with an almost organic quality, like a school of fish or a hunting pack. There was rhythm, but enough unpredictability to make exact positions hard to anticipate. Jake gave his orders. Packs 1 through 5 would focus on the distress beacons, rescuing survivors as quickly as possible. Packs 6 through 10 would block any Krell reinforcements from the 4th planet. The rest would join Jake in hunting down and destroying the 6 patrolling Krell cruisers. The fleet split smoothly, ships peeling off toward their assigned objectives. Jake allowed himself a brief moment of satisfaction. The Wolfpack system was functioning exactly as designed. Every captain knew their role and could adapt tactics on the fly without waiting for approval. The Defiance accelerated forward with 6 other ships from their pack in loose formation as they closed on the nearest Krell cruiser. Danny reported that the enemy had noticed them at 200,000 kilometers and was adjusting course to intercept. The Krell accelerated hard, matching human speed and exceeding Council estimates of their capabilities. Jake instructed Lisa to relay the updated acceleration data to all other packs. Every piece of information about Krell performance was critical. Humanity's strategy treated every engagement as an intelligence-gathering opportunity, learning to fight smarter with each encounter. Lieutenant Amy Park, handling weapons and tactical systems, reported that they would reach firing range in 30 seconds. She also flagged something unusual. The Krell holes appeared partially biological, showing signs of life. Lisa confirmed the readings, explaining that the Krell employed bioelectric propulsion systems, which accounted for their extraordinary agility and unpredictable movements. Their movement patterns seemed organic rather than mechanical. Jake asked if that changed their approach to destroying the enemy ship. Amy shook her head. Missiles and railguns would work equally well against biological or mechanical targets. Open fire, Jake ordered. The Defiance's railguns spat tungsten rounds at a fraction of light speed. Hypervelocity projectiles slammed into the Krell cruiser's shields, which flared with eerie organic energy patterns before collapsing entirely. The rounds punched through the hull. Dark fluid sprang into space like the blood of a wounded animal. The Krell's response was immediate and brutal. Weapons that appeared grown rather than built unleashed streams of superheated plasma at the human vessels. Evasive pattern delta. Jake barked. The Defiance twisted sideways, maneuvering in ways that would have violated every council doctrine about formation integrity. All ships scatter. Make them work for every shot. The human fleet dispersed in apparent chaos, but it was carefully orchestrated disorder. Each vessel moved independently while maintaining constant awareness of its packmates' positions. The Krell tried to focus on individual targets, but the humans refused to cooperate. Every time a Krell ship committed to chasing one human vessel, 2 or 3 others struck from unexpected angles. When the Krell regrouped, the humans pressed the attack even harder. It was less a battle than a 3-dimensional knife fight in zero gravity. Jake sent rapid-fire orders over the quantum channel, Pack 7 to flank the enemy, Pack 12 to break apart a cluster of cruisers forming a defensive position, missile boats to saturate a specific grid with proximity-fused warheads. The missiles streaked toward their targets, detonating early to create clouds of high-velocity shrapnel that shredded the Krell's organic armor. One cruiser vented atmosphere and biological fluids while spinning out of control. The other patrol cruisers seemed enraged, abandoning formation to charge directly at the humans. Some even attempted direct rams. Lisa noted quietly that the Krell were exhibiting emotional responses, and Gurich contradicted council reports that described them as emotionless biological machines. Jake speculated that perhaps the Krell had never been harmed enough to provoke true anger before. Fall back toward the blocking force, Jake ordered, testing whether the Krell could recognize a trap or were too enraged to care. They took the bait completely, following the retreating humans into a killing zone where 30 warships lay in ambush. The trap was flawless. Crossfire erupted from multiple angles. Railgun rounds and missiles tore through the Krell shields and bioelectric systems. Within minutes, all 6 cruisers were destroyed or crippled beyond repair. 3 weeks into the campaign, Admiral Jake Morrison stood in the Defiance's tactical center, staring at a holographic map that displayed something that should have been impossible. Across 47 star systems, humanity's wolf packs had rescued over 80,000 survivors and destroyed more than 300 Krell vessels without losing a single human. Ship to enemy action. It should have been a cause for celebration, but Jake felt a cold dread settling in his stomach. He pointed to several recent engagements on the map. "They're learning," he told Lisa Hayes quietly. Lisa highlighted the data. Krell forces were no longer sending small patrols into areas with human activity. Instead, they concentrated into larger formations and moved with greater caution. She pointed to a recent encounter where human ships had attempted their standard hit-and-run tactics, but the Krell had refused to pursue and simply held their position. The enemy had stopped taking the bait. Admiral Ryan Cooper's voice came through the quantum channel from Earth, confirming what everyone already knew. The Krell were adapting faster than humanity's strategists had anticipated. Jake agreed. The Krell were aggressive, but clearly not stupid. Humanity had been teaching them through combat that small groups could be destroyed easily. Now the enemy was bringing overwhelming force. Lieutenant Danny Wright interrupted with a priority signal from Pack 17 where Captain Ellen Foster commanded. The message reported a massive Krell fleet gathering in the Navarra system. Early scans indicated at least 200 vessels, with more possibly en route. The tactical center fell silent. 200 Krell ships represented more than half of humanity's entire deployed fleet, more firepower than had been seen in any single engagement so far. Danny added that the Navarra system contained 4 inhabited planets with a combined population of 12 million, 2 human colonies, and settlements from Zephyrian and Mordani species. Strategically, controlling Navarra would give the Krell a staging ground to strike deeper into defended territory. Lisa spoke quietly, the words echoing everyone's thoughts. The Krell were forcing humanity into a conventional battle, where hit-and-run tactics would fail. They were daring the human fleet to meet them. Head dash on, Jake asked the obvious question. Could they actually win a direct engagement against 200 enemy ships? Lisa paused before answering honestly. Not without severe casualties. If humanity committed fully and lost, the outer rim would collapse. The other systems would be defenseless. Admiral Cooper leaned toward his camera, his expression grim. Earth would support Jake's decision, but he needed to understand the stakes. If the fleet failed at Navarra, billions more would die as the Krell swept through undefended systems. Jake felt the crushing weight of command. Every war required calculating acceptable losses. But how could anyone judge the acceptability of abandoning 12 million people? Danny interrupted again. Multiple quantum channels were opening. Representatives from various council species wanted to speak immediately. The holographic display shifted, showing a dozen alien faces from across the Galactic Council. Jake recognized several, including Ambassador Threx of the Valoran Empire, whose reptilian features betrayed no emotion. Threx spoke first, stating that the Council had monitored humanity's actions in the Outer Rim with great interest. Jake replied coldly. Interest was an interesting choice of words, considering these same species had voted to abandon everyone out here. A Zephyrian counselor spoke next. Her crystalline voice resonated through the translator. Humanity's accomplishments in just 3 weeks were unprecedented. Humans had rescued thousands of Council citizens and destroyed Krell forces previously considered unbeatable. The Council had reconvened to discuss the situation. Jake's reply was sarcastic. Are you going to vote on whether to be impressed? Threx's expression might have been a smile. Impressive talent for sarcasm, but not why we're calling, he said. Council analysts had studied the situation and concluded that while humanity's tactics worked against scattered Krell forces, they would fail against a concentrated fleet. The Krell were gathering in Navarra specifically to annihilate the human fleet. Simulations predicted at least 70% losses. The Outer Rim would fall regardless, and humans would have sacrificed themselves for nothing. Jake was silent for several seconds before asking if the Council was offering a warning, or an excuse for why they still wouldn't help. After an uncomfortable pause, the Zephyrian counselor replied, officially. The Council could not commit forces. The previous vote was binding. Yet some species had independently positioned assets near Navarra for unrelated reasons. 6 months later, Admiral Jake Morrison once again stood in the Galactic Council chamber. Everything felt different. The massive room was packed with delegates from every member species, and this time they were listening intently. Holographic displays showed maps of the Outer Rim territories, now marked in blue for defended space rather than red for enemy occupation. In just 6 months, humanity had achieved the impossible. Speaker VL stood at his post, insect-like features unreadable. The Council formally acknowledged that humanity's intervention had produced unexpected results. In half a year, humans had accomplished what combined Council fleets could not in 3 years. The Krell had been forced from 70% of previously occupied territory. Civilian casualties had dropped by 92%. Most importantly, Outer Rim populations had organized into functional defensive networks supported by human training and resources. Jake stood at attention in his dress uniform. Though he would have preferred to be back on the Defiance with his crew, Lisa Hayes stood beside him, and behind them was a delegation of survivors from multiple species. United by shared experience of abandonment and rescue, Ambassador Threx rose. His reptilian voice carried across the chamber. Humanity had proven the Council wrong. Defense was possible. Humans had demonstrated will where the Council had lacked it. A Manny representative spoke next. Noting humanity's tactical innovations, wolfpack strategies, adaptive command structures, and the willingness to fight unconventionally lessons, Council races could not easily replicate. Jake spoke quietly. Humans call it survival. The chamber fell silent, every delegate turning to him. Jake had not planned to speak yet, but now that he had their attention, he continued.